Oh, hello. A question that came during the writing AMA is, what is the process of ghostwriting a book and how I go about ghostwriting a book? So, the answer to that question is, the process of ghostwriting a book is very similar to writing a book. There is only one step missing, which is a very important step in retrospect, but ideas. The idea belongs to someone else, right? So, say for instance, I'm writing about a fan without blades, right? As in a fan that doesn't have those blades, and yet the fan throws air. So, of course, something like that doesn't exist, but this is a hypothetical concept. Someone has thought up this idea and they now want me to write a book about the entire process of how they came up with the idea and how it is that they approach the entire process of patenting it, then taking the product into manufacturing, and then becoming a success as a result of the sale of this impossible unicorn product, right? So this is basically the idea. This idea hypothetically belongs to somebody else. So this somebody else is obviously too busy to write a book, because in this fictional universe, bladeless fans already exist, and this person has a very big company on account of it. So what they do is they task their PA to find someone to sort of write their book for them, right? Because there are parts of the public relations world that focus a lot on these things before companies go public, or when stock prices are tanking and all of that, because I have done a lot of work for these kind of books as well, where the sole purpose of getting the book written was to assign credibility to the subject of the book. So essentially, that's the only difference between writing a book and ghostwriting a book. With writing a book, the first thing that you have to do is you have to brainstorm an idea. Like you need, if you're writing non-fictional books, which is what I ghostwrite, you have to have a unique idea. Like say Rutger Bregnan's Utopia for Realists. This is not a ghostwritten book, right? This is a real book. He wrote about the 40-hour work week and universal basic income, and how working just 4 days in a week is more productive, not just for the employees but also for the companies that these employees work in, right? And he had this idea, and he went to Davos and annoyed a lot of billionaires with his very practical questions right on their faces, right? So that was his idea, that was his experience, and he converted it into a fabulous book, right? So that is the first process of writing a book, very important process, because you need to have a concept. Same with Ronan Farrow, right? The whole Harvey Weinstein scandal was made public by his reporting of the cases. So the fact that he went deep into all these investigative no-go zones, and now as the cases have already concluded, he gets to write about those incidences and shine like a massive spotlight on it. So that is the key difference, which is that the idea doesn't have to be yours. It is somebody else's idea. And this is where the ghostwriter has to step in, because see, the thing about using someone else's ideas is that you have to be able to understand them, right? So in case you don't really prefer physics or chemistry, and I sit down and try to talk to you about quantum electrodynamics, chances are, on account of the fact that you don't like these subjects, and because you don't like these subjects, you never really try to learn more about them beyond the scope of your syllabus. So when I talk to you about QED, you obviously won't be that enthusiastic towards listening to these ideas, and grasping is an entirely different conversation. So this is where the ghostwriter has to be as stupid as possible, in my opinion, which is that you have to understand the idea. Because if you don't understand the idea that your client is trying to convey to you properly, you won't be able to write the book fairly, or you won't be able to write the book the way your client wants their book to be written. Because see, here's the thing, getting ideas is difficult. I try to sit still and think of a concept that could be turned into a book. With fiction, you can use your imagination, right? If you have an active imagination, you can write some quality fiction up quickly. But with non-fiction, you need to have a thought-provoking concept in a specific genre, and then you have to back that concept up with a lot of research or psychoanalysis or scientific analysis or some credible sources that back up your claim, right? So it's really tough to come up with a concept in the first place. So you have to respect your client and their concept enough to ask as many questions as you possibly can to understand the concept, right? So that is part of my process as a ghostwriter. The first step that I do is I try to understand the idea that my client has. And I ask so many questions, so many seemingly dumb questions to get the gist of that idea. Because it is, as I said, it is very difficult, and you have to respect the process of having an idea in the first place, right? So step number one is understand the concept that you are going to ghostwrite a book on, right? Step number two is start intensive research. Now this is applicable to non-fiction. It is applicable to fiction as well, because fictional work that is really done properly, and you could see Lord of the Rings as an example for that. Like the geography of the place, the biology of the creatures, all of it is explained so spectacularly that fans love it. No matter how hard you try to dissect some of the lore, it is difficult because it is done so well. So the second step is to conduct immaculate research and segregate your research properly. So you can use your own techniques of idea segregation. For me, color coding is what works. So I use color coding, which is I separate my researches with different text colors and background colors, right? So that's what I do. I do a lot of research and I place it under proper colors and backgrounds. The third step is to prepare the skeleton of the book. The skeleton of the book is like the index, so to speak, right, where you define how many chapters you're going to do and what each chapter is going to contain, right? So this is a very rough mock-up of what your book's index would ultimately become, right? So that is step number 3, and you can only do this step once you have completed the research step properly. So all this stuff takes a lot of time because very research sensitive and all of that, which is why ghostwriting payment models include price per word plus research time pay per hour, right? So yes, that is definitely something that you will be paid to do. And if you are like me, someone who enjoys reading, someone who likes to learn a lot of new things, it's a very rewarding process in the end. So step 3 is to prepare the skeleton, right? And then you get the skeleton approved, because obviously your client who has had the idea definitely has their own ideas on the thing that you have done. So you have to be in constant communication with your client throughout the whole process. You send the skeleton over. Once they approve it, they won't approve it immediately. They'll have their own inputs to give for sure. So you take their inputs into consideration, tweak your skeleton, and then you go on to step 4, which is you start writing. So it is best, in my opinion, to submit your drafts on Google Documents, where commenting is a thing and where the client can live track your status, because it is their book ultimately, right? They will want a say in how their book sounds. Some people like their book to sound very simple, in my experience. Some people want their book to have that kind of an intellectual feel to it. So they want heavy vocabulary, they want technical terms almost everywhere, etc., etc. So it's best if you keep them in the loop as you write, so that your editing process and the amount of rewriting that you have to do is limited. So once you start writing with your client continuously following up with you, in my experience, you get in a flow. As in, the concept has made sense to you. You have done all this research on the concept, and the client has approved of your style, has approved of your interpretation of their kick-ass idea, right? So you are experiencing this emotional and yeah, I'm a writer wala high. So you'll be in a flow. So you want to capitalize on that flow. So you're gonna be tippy typing away like a storm for like 1.5, 2 months, and once that is done, you go to the final step, which is reread one last time and submit the draft, right? Because the reason why we reread is sometimes there are grammar errors that you leave in unconsciously. Of course, I use Pro Writing Aid to catch as many mistakes as tool can. But again, human proofing has its own advantages. Like if you write with going twice, sometimes the tool won't catch it, but then like you can. So the final step is reread it once more and then you submit it to your client. And you get 50% paid up front and 50% plus the research time pay once you submit the draft, right? So that is the ghostwriting process that I follow. I hope that the answer was satisfactory. Bye-bye.